Hello Roboteers, and welcome to another Team Mashup event video, this time at Botz in Wisconsin. I brought out 4 different robots to this event. My plastic Plasferatu, 2 open ants, Chop Shop and Nosferatu. Nosferatu, the one I almost always bring to events. And then lastly, what is shown here, Gargoyle, my new Beetleweight. Well, my first Beetleweight, actually. I've never built one before, so I wasn't certain how this was going to go. I was actually a little bit worried that it was just kind of going to fall apart on me. It's based on Nosferatu, with similar weapon setup, aluminum ring around a direct-drive motor, which is generally not recommended in the Beetleweight class, but I wanted to try it. So far this fight's going pretty well for me, and I'm pleasantly surprised since Very Powerful has been known to do pretty well at events. I think the big thing that's going on here is that I have longer forks, which is allowing me to win most of the engagements. It gets his front wheels up just a little bit before we make contact. He's lost his weapon at this point, and looks like at least one of his drive side. You actually get more points for knocking out or pitting out someone, so I really wanted to push him out.
That's the kind of Beetleweight fighting we want to see. Wow, fantastic showing from Gargoyle.
Not more points for the overall rankings, but more points for getting into the final 4. Basically, like if there's a tie, I had 2 wins and 1 loss, and someone else had 2 wins and 1 loss. The tiebreaker would be if those were judges' decisions or knockouts or pitouts. So my second fight with Gargoyle here is against Segfault. Massive undercutter. I knew my best bet was to stay up on him, keep that weapon from spinning up, and I also noticed that front weapon, that weapon out there, has a gear on it, and some of the teeth are exposed at the front. So I figured if I get my weapon against those, I can rip off some of the gear teeth, locking the weapon up. His weapon is locked up at this point, or at least partially. It's not spinning. Halfway through the match, I'm feeling really good about it. He loses his blade. There, right there, you can see a drive side locks up, and yeah. He says that because I'm known for doing this, putting myself in the pit. So Segfault's driver is also the driver of Moonshot. I fight him later on in the antweight bracket. So, spoiler alert, this ends up being my last tournament fight for Gargoyle. I was pretty nervous going into this one because I don't have a ton of top armor. It's just like 2mm printed carbon fiber nylon. And that hit he just did, he actually messed up the power switch. It went right into the hole for the power switch and knocked them off. It actually stopped the drive from working for a little bit.
Gargoyle ends up in the pits.
So the way this works out is having won one fight and lost two out of the three total fights that you can get, I don't end up making it into the final four, and so that's the last tournament fight. I end up at like 7th place out of the 9 people there. But we do get to have a Beetle Rumble close to the end of the day, and I had nothing to lose by throwing it in there because I was totally out of the tournament, and Gargoyle was still in pretty good shape actually. All the people fighting right now, except for Wicked Wedge, are out of the tournament. Wicked Wedge actually has another couple tournament fights, and he does go on later to actually win the whole thing. But he has 2 frames, so he decided to put one into the Rumble. I noticed that Wicked Wedge's wedge was kind of halfway off. I was trying to break it the rest of the way off. He escaped into the pit.
We are halfway through. So now it's Gargoyle against the world. Pacino.
I lost that same drive sided that I did in the Seg fault fight. I think that motor must have a little bit of junk in the gearbox. Every once in a while it gets into the wrong spot and locks up the gears. Because when I take it out of the box, I start spinning it, and it just works fine after that again for a while. I'll probably just have to rebuild them.
30 seconds left.
Not much exciting happens for the rest of the fight. Pacino, being flipped upside down, struggles to drive. Their spinner constantly hits the ground just a little bit. And I've lost drive on one side, so I'm not able to do much.
They're trying. 3, 2, 1. That's a match. Weapons off.
So I was pretty happy with how Gargoyle performed during the day, but it just needs a couple little tune-ups and changes. One thing I know that's a real big pain about it is that you got to split it in half to change the weapon motor. It takes a long time. Alright, so we're moving on to the next class, Plasferatu. My plastic antweight. Basically, this is a almost completely unchanged, older version of Nosferatu. It has the unibody, and the frame's just made out of PLA Plus, and the weapon and forks are made out of PLA Plus as well.
2, 1, go. So pack your bags. The Pac-Man themed robot Plasferatu, the McDonald's looking thing.
Right off the bat, pack your bags. Their wheel gets pushed against the frame a little bit and it locks up. I had actually the rubber fall off of one of my wheels and get locked up between the frame and the side rail.
For anyone watching for the first time, you've probably gathered combat robots can be pretty finicky.
I need to glue the rubber to the rim, and I forgot to do it for the plastic ones.
So we've got 1 minute 20 seconds left to try and get some contact. Let's see who blows up first. All right, there's a fork off Plasferatu. Pack your bags. Trying to chip away at those wheels. Hey, Pack Your Bags has some drive. All right, so they've magically come alive. They've got half the match. Try and break Plasferatu.
So I take a nasty hit on the side of my spinner, and it explodes.
Not giving up.
That's the fun thing about plastic antweights, is that it can be very destructive.
That weapon was half the reason they were moving.
So now I've lost both sides of my drive and the weapon.
Pack your bags.
I had to tap out at that point. No reason to get counted out.
Well done.
Just wasting everyone's time.
See what he gets.
The next fight, second fight with Plasferatu is against... It's basically a plastic viper, and it has all the weaknesses of a viper, which is like it doesn't drive upside down very well.
Yeah, Plasferatu just all over the back of them. Can they move?
I damaged one of their drive sides, so they've got one side drive plus being upside down.
8, 7. Looks like it's kind of moving. 10, 9.
This is actually the second frame for Plasferatu, the spare frame. The first one, after getting messed up like that, I didn't even bother repairing it.
Knockout. Your winner, Plasferatu. Plasferatu.
I did glue the wheels on, though, and I don't run into that issue for the rest of the day. So, Meep Meep
Sorry,
was
we're debating the last match.
the robot that I expected to, you know, potentially be right there at the end of the tournament with me.
On this match, Meep Meep Plasferatu. Starting in 3,
Very fast
1, go.
Brazilian drive vertical spinner by Trevor. It'd been fairly successful. He tried something here, though, a little bit different.
You know,
He
the
took
last match is so dead even. What if we had the competitors place bets on a match?
the front forks off of it.
Whoever wins.
Now, I always keep the forks on,
Maybe that determines
or
the judges'
almost always keep them on, just because without them, it's kind of front heavy and it'll flip forward really easily. You'll notice he doesn't have those forks on there, and it's kind of making it a little bit more bouncy.
Great bit of driving, so Plasferatu
I've
has that drive all
a
working.
little bit bigger weapon, a little bit more reach.
Chase around Meep Meep. Meep Meep bouncing all around.
You can start to see some little pieces starting to fall off.
Good when they can get it in just the right spot, but right now they're doing a lot of bouncing backwards. There goes the drive.
And the attrition of the fight
Falling out of Meep Meep. Meep Meep.
started to crack.
Drive.
One of their drive pods fell off.
Trying to chip away at them. 45 seconds left. As Mike has pointed out, it is just meat now. 30 seconds left. Oh, and that is
Right there, the
it.
battery pops out,
Plasferatu picks up.
ending the fight in a technical knockout. So, because I was able to pick up 2
3,
knockouts,
1.
I was able to just barely eke in
This is Plasferatu
to the last,
Grimace.
the top 4,
2 hard-hitting
which is the cutoff for the finals in the plastic class.
Grimace has proven to be a super reliable
There was a couple other robots that had 2 and 1 as well, but they had a judge's decision in there, which is worth slightly less points.
Plasferatu only blew up that one time, but they're very, very well driven. Both robots
So,
a little close.
Grimace is driven by Luke's son. He's a good driver.
Grimace with some
As you can
aggressive
see here,
hard-hitting.
he's got a robot that has wheels way back and the weapon way forward. That's normally a really difficult to drive design, but he does a good job of keeping that weapon pointed at me all the time. At this point, I've lost drive on one side.
Roughly in
The forks got ripped off.
Plasferatu just tumbling all around. Are they
He grabs hold of my weapon belt.
stuck?
Not my weapon belt. My drive belt on that side.
Manage that.
That was actually the side that the drive wasn't working anyway.
We have 50 seconds left in the match. What did you do?
What was interesting about this hit is that his weapon had started getting kind of soft from the friction, and so when it got stuck and stopped, it actually glued itself to the side of the robot and it wouldn't turn anymore. They were actually talking about, because they were having trouble getting it apart, they were talking about going to a judge's decision, which I really didn't want, because I knew I was on the losing side of a judge's decision right now.
Like, maybe, but something's gonna break.
I needed those last 50 seconds to potentially have something happen and maybe pull out a win.
So it's like, do you cut the belt and take out the drive? Bear wants to keep fighting. Alright. Well, impressive. Drivers ready? 3, 2, 1, resume.
So he has lost his weapon primarily because it's stuck to the side of the frame,
Left on the clock.
but he still has full drive.
Nosferatu doing a little bit of crab walking.
I've lost drive on one side,
Fully functional.
but I still have the weapon though. I'm hopeful that maybe he'll come close enough that I can spin into one of the wheels, knock off one of the drive sides. That would put me slightly ahead on the scorecards because he would have lost a drive side and the weapon at that point.
15 seconds left. Plasferatu desperately trying to engage, just not able to do so.
He does a very good job though, always leading with that weapon.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Even if it's not functional anymore, it still makes a good piece of armor.
Alright. Well done.
So yep, I lose that one. Rightfully so. I wasn't able to really drive for most of it. So this ends up being my last fight for Plasferatu. As you just heard, it's the third place match against Blackbird.
Wins the first exchange. Plasferatu all over them, grinding up that side armor now.
I'm a little bit faster than Blackbird. Their weapon is very bulletproof though.
Uh-oh, watch the pit.
Most of these weapon-to-weapon exchanges I've been losing against it.
Blackbird, women
But I'm very quick.
exchanges though.
I can get around to the side sometimes. And the attrition of the battle is starting to knock pieces off,
In.
bits of side armor.
Blackbird winning these weapon-on-weapon exchanges, but their drive sides are losing. Plasferatu just tearing into the side armor of Blackbird, not giving them an inch. And you can see Blackbird starting to struggle. They're kind of skating across the arena, just barely mobile. The only thing in this match
I
is
had-
a bulletproof weapon, but
I pretty much lost all my forks at this point, so I was running no forks. I figured they would probably just get
off the wheel.
eaten by
Trying to line 'em up.
his drum spinner anyway. So at this point, the driver of Blackbird taps out because his battery
That's an understandable tap out. Your winner,
had
Plasferatu.
slid to the front of the robot and the plastic was gone there, so it was going to slide into his weapon. So we're switching over to the open ant category now. This was the biggest category at the event.
Just waiting
I
for.
believe there was 38
Power up.
robots in the bracket.
All right, drivers ready.
So my very
Start
first
this
fight
in 3, 2, 1, go.
with Nosferatu was against Midnight. I fought Midnight a few times. I've normally been pretty successful, but this is a new design for him.
Nosferatu. Oh. Good pop there. Nosferatu's got that vertical spinner. They are
So-
crab walking just a little bit.
This new version of Nosferatu, I haven't had nearly as much trouble with losing drive sides,
Horizontal blade up to
but
speed.
this frame is running MK2 repeat robotics,
Good.
motors,
Cross hit there.
and they're a little bit more prone to having the motor can pop off, and that's what happened in this case.
We are 40 seconds in. Nosferatu getting sliced up. Midnight stuck in the wall. We're going to pause the match. Match paused. We're going to use the one unstick for an arena fault on Midnight. So, if somebody wants to open up that left door, maybe get the grabber. Let's try and free them from the wall.
I really should probably switch over to just MK3. They don't have that problem nearly as much. Actually, I've never seen that happen before in my robots with the MK3 repeat robotics motors.
This is awesome. Alright, robots free. Let's begin in 3, 2, 1, go. Alright.
So this is not going particularly well for me at this point.
Midnight, fully functional.
There's been some good hits I put on him,
Oh, good pop.
but I'd lost a drive side and it's halfway through the fight.
Nosferatu.
Yeah.
That cracked the frame and took out the weapon on Midnight.
That was a very...
Evening out the scorecards a little bit as Nosferatu crab walks away closer to Midnight.
Yeah, it's a very key hit.
It's certainly a method of mobility.
It knocked out the weapon and a drive side, and Midnight's struggling to drive at all.
35 seconds left.
As long as I have my weapon, I can drive okay with a single drive side.
Midnight also having some drive issues. Although, approaching that weapon might not be... It might not end well for them. We saw how much damage was just done to that weapon. About 15 seconds left. We'll see how many more hits actually can happen in this match. Nosferatu's got to be a little careful with that pit. Time is winding down. We've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's a fight. All right, good match. A lot of explosive action.
Too often I've had situations where using my weapon to drive like that has caused my battery to go completely dead when I had a 300 milliamp hour battery in there. So I've increased it to a 380. I just had to find some weight for it. So this next fight is against Flip It.
Gently nudging them.
I really didn't want to totally break this robot up because it's a new... Well, it's one of the builds that I have uploaded to Thingiverse, and I didn't want to totally destroy the robot because it's a brand new build and they haven't really gotten it fully working right. They actually had to take off the rear motors and wheels to get it to drive. I figured if I could just put him in the pit, I wouldn't have to do much damage. Unfortunately, the Malinky high voltage ESC that they're using just doesn't seem to put out quite enough power to run all 4 of those N20s with the very grippy wheels. Another lifter. Control bot. Very low to the ground front forks.
Chasing them around. Bigfoot. That's a good ground game though, so good bit of driving. They're going to try to stay squared up, ideally with the side of Nosferatu.
Definitely giving me some trouble. But those exposed wheels on the sides do look pretty tasty.
Powerful weapon though, so Bigfoot's going to need to be careful that they don't lose the forks on the front.
They basically have to drive about perfect all match.
Nosferatu up against the side. Well done, now backing them in to the corner. Nosferatu chasing them pretty close to the pit.
I tend to drive very aggressively. I don't even really think about it. That's probably why I end up in the pit so much. There, we're starting to get a hit. It's probably the first really good hit. Couple more. I think it's right about here that one of the drive sides locks up.
Bigfoot still seems functional.
At this point, I'm sitting in a really good spot. A control bot that's lost a drive side is in real trouble.
30 seconds left. It is all Nosferatu, just tearing away at the sides of Bigfoot.
I was a little nervous there for a second because I thought I might have gotten caught in Bigfoot. I thought they might be able to kind of get over to the pit and dump me in there or something like that.
Gotta be careful of that pit. 10 seconds left.
I'm always shooting for the knockout just because it's worth more points. Or the pit out.
2, 1, match over. All right, we'll see what our judges think of that. across the arena, we've got Nosferatu and
So,
Slam.
this is the last fight
Final round of open antweights.
of the normal tournament.
Let's begin.
And then it will go on to the
2,
final 8.
go.
So far, Slam and myself
Make this an
have
intense final round.
taken no losses.
Nosferatu and Slam.
I saw Slam put on their really long forks, so I actually did the same. Slam struggles when they get upside down. They could, for the most part, go head-to-head with Nos as long as they stay upright. As soon as they get them flipped upside down, though, they struggle.
Up and grinding into the floor, but not anything it's supposed to.
I'm just trying to poke them towards the pit without getting too close myself.
Nosferatu just working them closer and closer to the pit, trying to get them to bounce. And they do it! Well done! So Nosferatu getting some redemption.
So that leaves me with 4 wins and a couple pit outs,
Start the fight in 3, 2.
meaning Nosferatu ended up being the #1 seed for the final 8,
And their fork line.
meaning I'm going up against the #8 seed Mondo Money.
Making some
2-wheel drive control bot with really long forks.
But Nosferatu is driven by Jeremiah Ashbrook. Need I say more?
Its forks are quite a bit longer than mine, so I do have to get around to an edge or the side of a fork. There he gets a good...
Wow, how they managed that hit.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nosferatu catches an edge and
Somehow
flips around the wrong way.
the spinner hit the fork from underneath. It does stick out the bottom just a little bit. Which is bad if I lose my front wheels, but otherwise it doesn't
We
matter.
are 50 seconds into the match. Nosferatu keeps finding the sides
He's-
of those forks.
He's starting to be hurt now. He's lost a drive side. His forks are kind of splaying outward. Actually, part of the aluminum sides of the frame are starting to get bent.
Nosferatu trying to put them in the pit. Nosferatu so aggressively driven. Despite Mondo Money's best efforts to keep those forks pointed in the right direction, it's so tough to do so.
Right there, his power switch actually splits in half,
9, 8,
causing him to have no power
6,
and get knocked out.
4, 3, 2, 1, knockout. So Nosferatu breaks something loose, and Mondo Money just quit.
So,
Is everyone ready?
Midnight, the same horizontal spinner I fought earlier
Let's start
with
this
Nosferatu, he had done well the rest of the day, racking up some knockouts, and so he ended up with 3 and 1,
underway.
and I believe he was the #6 seed.
Having a scary tumble to start the match off. Gets a good shot on the weapon of midnight.
I still generally feel pretty decent about fighting
Some close calls with that pin.
Midnight. I put the TPU wedge on the front,
Down
locked up Midnight's weapon again.
from Nosferatu.
Feeling really good about it at this point.
Didn't expect it to quit at only 2. 30 seconds in.
At this point, I had never taken a loss against Midnight, so I'm
Nosferatu
feeling pretty confident that I could win it. This is the semifinals as well, so after this I'd be going right into the finals with Nos.
with all the steel at the front of the robot.
He's using that front blade to kind of block.
This is Nosferatu's match to lose.
Halfway through,
Halfway through.
he's lost a drive side, lost his weapon. That little bump gets it running again.
Midnight broke something free.
Gives him a chance, but I'm still looking really good for me.
Capitalize as that thing spins
I'm playing too close to the pit, though. I always do that.
No!
Right there.
He was lined up.
So his weapon was spinning towards the pit, so when I took that strike, it popped me right in.
The side of the arena.
It's actually funny because Midnight was basically done after that, over in the corner, but I'm in the pit, so he still wins.
Gargoyle, both going out in the same way.
Yeah, like I say, I'm known to do that. Remy, he'll always be outside the box. You know, he's rooting for me. He's like, stay away from the pit. Remember, don't do that. Because I'm known for that. Well, and here I'm fighting against Remy with Weird Flex. This is one that I would be quite nervous about putting me in the pit. I fought Weird Flex a lot of times with Nos. It's gone both directions at times. Remy or Rachel driving Weird Flex is always a really tough fight. They've got longer forks, and their robot kind of... It's so wide, it kind of encapsulates a little bit. Nosferatu chasing them all around. They get a good pop on the back of Weird Flex. Normally, I'll put a really sharp spinner on, because Weird Flex is all TPU frame. And I gotta try to get to the edges, get to the side. He's giving me a lot of trouble. He's controlling it a lot, and he has a lot of trouble pinning me because I can rev the weapon and do flips and stuff and get out of a pin, but it's doing me no favors in control category. Just, it looks bad. This particular setup of Weird Flex was struggling a little bit with grip, because the wheels he's running on there are foam with like sandpaper on them. They're not quite as grippy, but they hold up well against damage.
Weird Flex doing such a good job bullying Nosferatu in this arena.
I need to be doing more hits and more damage. Getting close to the end, I'm like, okay, I need to make some big hits right now. Maybe knock a wheel off. I could feel that most of the fight had been slightly not in my favor. I felt like it was a really good fight. But just the general feeling of the whole fight was, okay, I'm on the back rope. Yeah, so the judges end up agreeing with me that I was on the losing side of that. I did some good damage to the wheels, but it wasn't enough to actually impair his drive, so... Now we're going to switch over to my second antweight, Chop Shop.
Right,
normally,
Chop Shop and Darkwing.
Normally at these events I'll bring two antweights. I'll bring my serious one, Nosferatu, and then I'll bring one that's a little bit more fun. Either Killjoy... Or Chop Shop. I'm normally not quite as successful with them, but they're always fun and they're crowd pleasers.
Right. Drivers look ready.
My very first fight with Chop Shop is against Darkwing, driven by Luke.
Let's start this fight in 3, 2, 1, go! Alright, there we go. That cycle time looking a little better now. So Chop Shop under... Oh no! And they're in the pit.
It's like a 6-second pit out.
One moment. Chop Shop. Very, very good bit of driving there. They just put Darkwing straight into the pit.
So,
Cool.
I had done a lot of drive practice with Chop Shop, because it can be a little bit finicky.
Alright, here's Chop Shop and Forklift.
But drive and control is so important with a robot like this. You can't do anything with your weapon if you're not winning control.
Alright, Forklift.
Forklift, I was excited about this match because they don't have any weapon. My forks were longer, or at least as long, so I felt pretty good about it. I did a nice little slash right there. Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, that second strike there broke the motor shaft and the weapon fell off. Very annoying. I had trouble with that the entire event, actually, where those RS-2205 motors were constantly breaking. The shaft in those things is just really weak. Forklift basically driving himself in almost.
All right, drivers ready. Let's start the fight. In 3,
So far with Chop Shop, 2 pit outs. Those essentially count as knockouts as far as scoring.
So
Cuttlefish,
pink robot,
the first weapon robot I had to fight with Chop Shop, or
at the body of Chop Shop. Huge size difference in this match, but
damaging weapon, I guess I could say.
A very, very effective robot when it can get that weapon lined up with a top cover. So
I see a chance to strike, but it's right into his spinner, so I'm kind of holding back. But I'm very impatient, so I just send it. It's one of the problems with a robot like this. You gotta be patient. One of my forks is stuck upward just a little bit.
Maybe hurting a little bit after that. Their top plate's looking a little bit bent. But drive and weapon are still functional.
That's an excellent spot right there.
Oh, another good slice from Chop Shop.
Unfortunately, after that, the weapon is now broken. Just locked up. Not sure exactly what happened.
So Cuttlefish starting to rack up the damage.
I lost a wheel on one side. It actually drives pretty good still with just 3 wheels. If I lose 2 wheels, it really starts to suffer on drive.
Ooh, I don't know.
I have no weapon, so I'm just hitting him with it.
Aggressively hammer the back of Cuttlefish.
It still looks pretty good, even if it's not really doing any damage, as long as I can
Hard shot.
avoid taking damage while doing it.
But they're doing that intentionally, just jamming everything they have into the weapon of Cuttlefish, trying to stop it.
I was hoping maybe his weapon would break. I knew I wasn't looking very good at that moment.
Wires as entanglement, losing the motor in the process. Cuttlefish
Lost a wheel, lost my weapon.
give up.
He's lost nothing at this point. He's taken a pretty good slash in the back of the robot there. The driver, after the fight, told me that I was mere millimeters away from his battery, but that doesn't matter unless, well, horseshoes or hand grenades, right? So, the drive's functional still. Even the right side is actually functional, it's just kind of stuck. Going into the 4th and final normal tournament fight for Chop Shop against Franklin. Franklin's like a primarily metal build. Once again, I'm not patient, so I throw it right into his weapon, and I break the motor.
Wow. They might have hit something important, though.
The only advantage I have here is I do have really long forks, and I'm pretty quick compared to him.
Chop Shop lines
Just look, if I had been patient, what I could have done. I could have hit him on the bottom plate, which is normally not very thick.
generally just sending a hammer saw straight into a vertical spinner isn't a good strategy, but
Yes.
Chop Shop doesn't seem to care. In the name of maximum aggression, they do it every time.
You're so right, Joseph. I just need to learn a little bit more patience.
Franklin getting some good hits on the forks of Chop Shop. But Chop Shop outreaching them. Oh, and they go into the pit. Beautiful driving from Chop Shop. They found
So,
the opportunity and they capitalize.
all 3 of my wins in the normal tournament have been pit out wins. So with that, I actually end up being the number 3 seed still,
This fight.
even with that one loss against Cuttlefish.
Go.
So the first one in the final 8 is against Moonshot, a pretty scary vertical drum spinner. I fought him with Nosferatu before and actually lost to him in that case. I would feel pretty good about fighting him with my new build of Nosferatu, but I definitely don't feel good about fighting him with Chop Shop. Its spinner's low enough to the ground that he actually can kind of almost pick the forks up off the floor. I've lost a wheel. There goes Belts. The weapon motor's dead. It's basically like all over but the screaming at this point. I've got drive on one side. One thing he does struggle with is that
That was almost really bad.
he normally kind of struggles a little bit to get flipped back over when he gets flipped upside down. Another thing is he's so low to the ground, even a small thing like a thin belt like that can cause him to get stuck.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's a knockout.
Normally, I would feel like, oh man, that's not really a win. But, you know, after the earlier fight where I had Segfault on the ropes and then dumped myself into the pit, I don't feel too bad about it. This is against the same driver of Segfault. That allows me to continue on. Fight against Weird Flex. This is the... Well, I don't know if it's exactly a spoiler, but this is the fight right before I fight him with Nosferatu for the third place, or the chance at third place. I guess that spoils that I actually do win this one. Well, something very interesting about fighting Weird Flex with Chop Shop is that Remy drives just a little bit different when he knows that there's a weapon that can strike down on his top plate. He won't lock forks, so he's trying to get away and dumped himself in the pit. So this is actually the last... It didn't end up actually being the last fight of the day. There was one other fight after it for third place, but this is the finals fight. This is the big one. Midnight made it all the way to the finals. Chop Shop. Not the one I expected to have in the finals, but I did get the motor rebuilt. The weapon motor. And one thing I do like about Chop Shop against horizontals is that TPU wedge at the front does a really good job of scooping up those bots and slowing it on their blades. You saw just a minute ago, I brought the blade down through the front spokes and cutting the weapon belt. So he's down his weapon now. He's got no weapon.
They're almost going to have to flip over Midnight if they want to cut through the bottom. Now, I don't know if Midnight has a weapon anymore. I think they lost that weapon belt. Yeah.
I know at this point that this fight is mine, as long as I don't go in the pit and I don't break something on myself. So I'm being kind of careful. I'm avoiding racing around the arena, which is what I do quite often. I flip it around and I start trying to use the weapon as a vertical because he's making it very difficult to get a hold of him.
Maybe win a control battle. All are slim chances.
I get him kind of propped up a little bit, make another whack. I was actually making some really nice through shots going through that carbon fiber top plate, but I wasn't getting into anything important.
15 seconds left. Chop
The switch over to those Bane's Bots wheels actually gave him quite a bit more grip